Okay, we move on without respite. Okay, now we're going to have a little moment to go a bit deeper, actually, into the dynamics of change when it comes to reuse. I'd like to call back Anastasia on stage. You've met her already. And I would like to call as well Sîan Sutherland, sorry, I should know, co-founder of A Plastic Planet. Please welcome Sîan with a round of applause, of course. We have Clémence Schmid, who is General Manager at Loop TerraCycle. Please, Clémence, warm round of applause. Please join me on stage. And we have Fernando Rodríguez-Mata, Director General of New Era, the European Reuse Alliance. Fernando, please join me. Warm round of applause for Fernando. Okay, this is the moment I always enjoy because I actually get to sit down. Okay, good. So, yeah, no, I could stand, but let's have this one seated. Okay, so I'd like to start this little round of discussion with a question that would be borderline heretic, possibly in a forum such as this one. But I'd like you to reflect on why is single use so great? You know, because let's face it, single use is pretty cool. It's used a lot. So I'd like to hear from you. Why is it so great?
It's so
Sîan.
Convenient. Oh, sorry.
Yep.
It's so convenient. It's so cheap. It fits in with our grab and go lifestyles, and we abdicate all responsibility for it when we put it in the bin, even as a brand.
Perfect. Yep, please.
It's super easy. You don't have to think about it.
On top of everything, I think it's invisible for all of us.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, the triple C. Cool, cheap, convenient.
Okay, so we're faced with something that, you know, in principle is actually pretty amazing. That's why it's been taken up so much. And so you're faced with this challenge of trying to bring, you know, reuse to the market, so something that's quite different to single use. So can you tell me, and try and work on the basis of projects that you've been really working on in practice, right? Sîan, maybe first. Can you tell me some of the challenges that you face when you try and, you know, sell the reuse project?
I think I want to go back to Jane's presentation, and you remember that fantastic slide with the two circles, which was all about feasible and sustainable, you know, feasible and unsustainable, unfeasible. Whatever it was brilliant, those circles. But it was the bit in the middle that really got me excited because it was imagination and creativity. And this is the massive stumbling block. We are so used to the way that we live today, we cannot believe that we can shake the system up. And all of our industries are in plastic, fossil fuels are embedded all the way through. Single use is embedded all the way through. So it's very, very difficult when you work with industry because they know every reason why not. So the difficulty often is taking them out of that gridlock of every day they turn up with this baggage of the supply chain and the brand heritage and all the reasons why not, and this is the obstacle they put in front of them to climb over every day. So to actually get them into a space, which is a large part of what we do, for them to be able to go into that segment of imagination and think, if we created our business today, what would it look like? And for sure, the retail stores that we go into, even Migros, sorry, but they are Jurassic Parks of single-use colored plastic packaging still. And if you invented a supermarket or a brand today, it would not look like it does today. So it's giving people that freedom to think in a very, very different way. And then, of course, creating the infrastructure and the solutions that they can change. And of course, that's changing policy. Making, you know, why is it still legal to sell us things that we know is so fundamentally wrong? That is the question we need to ask every day. Why is it still legal to sell me the wrong thing? So we need policy change, we need taxation, all of those things. Of course, the UN Global Plastics Treaty, massive opportunity there. But then we need industry to step up to a whole different level of responsibility. I do not understand why a brand like Coca-Cola, the most loved brand in the world, can cause fossil fuel pollution of the scale that it does, 120 billion plastic bottles every single year, and abdicate all responsibility for the devastation it causes, when ExxonMobil even can't do that. So we need brands and businesses to step up to this new level of responsibility. And for me, the consumer is right at the bottom of the food chain, and we buy what we're sold, and industry has to sell us something different, and governments have to mandate they do it fast.
Okay, thank you. Fernando, maybe first on this question of the key challenges that you see for businesses to move towards reuse.
Well, for us, for sure, is the policy change, right? We need to be creative as well in pushing for some ambitious measures on reuse. We're facing, I would say, an important majority from member states and parliament members that are not convinced that reuse is the right way to go. I think we have been discussing today these LCA wars. We don't really know. I mean, maybe here we don't even have a consensus. So imagine out there with all the politicians listening to different players, mainly because of the resources, single-use manufacturers and operators telling how bad or how good reuse and single-use is. So we are trying to get there with the capacity we have. I think to reply on Sîan's question on Coca-Cola, why they escape and don't have any kind of responsibilities, because they get away with it. I mean, is there any kind of sanction in the market we see for Coca-Cola? No, they keep increasing their sales and so on. So, of course, they keep business as usual, as if nothing happened. That's why policy is also important. I could argue that we need somehow maybe consumers a bit more aware as well, even though they are indeed at the bottom line, but we need as well change from their side. Behavior change is necessary as well for the uptake of reuse systems. So yeah, it's a bit of everything. We need to have, I think Anastasia said, this holistic view. I mean, if we want to reuse systems to thrive, we cannot, everything has to be aligned to make it happen.
So you're both outlining the creative space that you need to invest in order to, show other things that might be possible, but then there's also the actual demonstration in practice. So Clémence, maybe first, when you're demonstrating reuse in practice, what kind of challenges do you come across as well that might make it difficult sometimes to convince people to switch?
Yes, I think I will join what was said. I would call it the willingness to act. Because in principle, if we ask anyone in this room and also outside, everyone will argue that yes, reuse is better, it's proven, you have the data, this is not being argued, but it's far away. What can I do now? And I think that there's a couple of things. Single use is very ingrained in our mentality, in the way the business is looking at it. It's hard to challenge the status quo if you have a system that has been set up in one way. And I think people are creator of habits, us as individual, organization in the exact same way. I mean, we've all taken all New Year's resolution, right? By January 1st, they're taken. By January 30th, the majority of them are given up. And it's something we set to ourselves as individuals that we're highly motivated to do, that we know is better for us and that we should do, and we still give it up. And I think that's the exact same feeling from an organization standpoint, how you really look beyond that difficulty and get in consumer habit change. You have what you call triggers, which are things that remind you every single day why you need to keep to your habits. Because once it's a habit, just like single use is a habit today, then it is going to run, and then the system will adapt, and then you'll get to scale, and then you'll get to this virtual circle of having consumption, which is more circular and which is better. But you need to get there, and I think this continuous working in the early stage is what's difficult.
This is a bit of a challenge that I see sometimes in the reuse discussion, because people will tend to say, yeah, but this only works in, very local, disconnected environments, in very specific scenarios. It's not something that you can easily scale up. This kind of argument you hear quite a bit. And so, in fact, it seems like you would need a totally different kind of way of consuming, a totally different business model. So big changes required. Again, then to go back to Anastasia, how do you deal with that? Because in the end, we need to make reuse cheap, cool, and convenient, right? Practically speaking, and at scale. So what are the kind of challenges that you face to do that?
Yeah, let's see if this mic works. Yeah. I think we kind of touched on the cool part, and I think consumer behavior is a really, really big and crucial part of this, is if you want to convince people to do something differently, you can't. It's actually proven that you can't punish them, and then it will change their behavior. It's a lot more effective if you can show them the shiny object and say, if you participate in this reuse, you're actually cool, you're able to get rewards, you're able to get a better experience. From a psychology perspective, that's really key. And then when we're talking about kind of like what scenarios it works best in and where it doesn't work quite well, I think it really comes down to unit economics. And when we are talking to brands and food businesses, quite a few of them are actually interested in the idea of reuse, and they're open to trying it out. But where it often breaks down is in the business case. When you're telling them, this is going to be on per unit basis, this is going to be 10 cents more expensive. And oftentimes the margins for food businesses are so slim to begin with. So even 10, 20, 30% increase in the cost, that's where it really breaks down. So I don't really have an answer to this, but I think it goes back to the point of infrastructure and really achieving efficiency and scale for reuse in order to really being able to compare it to single use.
There was one question for your presentation, actually, so I'll just do it now. It was online, and the question was reacting to your high return rate. I think it was 98.5%. So it kind of links up to what you're saying on infrastructure and the efficiency of the system. But how much of these returns were actually reusable, in the sense that you might also get returns that are no longer reusable for whatever reason? Maybe the container has been misused, or I don't know. Do you have a share of returns that are no longer reusable and are therefore discarded from the system? Do you have a sense of that?
Yeah, and surprising thing, it's really low. It's less than 1%. I think it goes back to kind of material choice and systems design in general, that first of all, you want to find a way to punish people for doing damage to those assets, and at the same time, you want to choose really, really durable material that can withstand reasonable types of handling it.
Okay, brilliant. And I'd like to then push Sean a little bit further on this question of upscaling, right? Because if we stay very local, we sort of in a way minimize, it seems to me, the potential impact, you know? Maybe you could still have a lot of impact if it's really adopted across all municipalities and all the rest of it. But can we not think about scale as well?
Yeah, how do we create a new normal where we look back and think, why was it ever okay? Why did we have all these multiple bins in our kitchens, in our street, just full of all this trash? So one of the, and also that whole thing of, we look at refill systems often, and how many of them are just marketing? How many of them are big brands saying, we've tried refill, it's failed, we've done some pre-fill little pilots in a couple of supermarket stores, they failed. They will always fail, because it is not a scalable solution until we collaborate. So one of the projects that we're involved in the UK, and I was really ashamed when you put that map, when that map went up of all the refill things, there was one for the whole of the UK. Sixth biggest economy in the world, we had one refill system in the last 8 years. Fortunately, many, many more things are happening right now. And we're involved in a project which is called Reposit. And Reposit is the first time that we are bringing together competitive brands and retailers of the biggest polluters of the planet, the Unilevers, the P&Gs, the L'Oreals, the Lushes, the Body Shops, all in the personal care, the Reckitt's, personal care and home care. So not food, which I know we very much focused on here, but starting with personal care and home care, to create a cooperative which is owned by all stakeholders, that will build the logistics system to collect, wash, and redistribute returnable, standardized packaging, and that keyword is standardized. And it's the whole infrastructure is to the benefit of the stakeholders, but largely it's to the benefit of the consumer, because so many of these refill systems, ultimately, none of them are cheap, cool, or convenient. They're definitely not convenient. They're not the way I shop. So we have to create a system where, imagine a world where you go into your local Douglas, let's say, or for me, my local Tesco, and I pull from the shelf a stainless steel or an aluminium labeled bottle of Dove shampoo. In that section, every 250 ml bottle is using the same structure, but it looks completely different because it's got a full-size label on it. So the branding, the equity of the brand is still there. It's already full. Completely convenient for me. I take it home. I then, when I've used it, there are thousands of drop-off points, because scale is the only thing that will make this work. There are thousands to drop off. I could take that bottle of shampoo, the empty, I could drop it off at a Starbucks. There's a QR code. Everything is very simply asset tracked. This is not about an enormous amount of technology to be built. That asset tracking gives me a reward because, as you say, we need to reward people, and deposit systems automatically feel like a penalty, not a reward. So instead of calling this a deposit scheme, this is a reward scheme. So these are returnables, they're rewardables. And then that goes straight to me as a €2, let's say, credit that I can either spend on my reusable cup of coffee from Starbucks, or I can go somewhere else. But the opportunity for reward here for brands is phenomenal, because then Dove, who owned the shampoo, when I return it, they can also reward me in some way. The Starbucks can reward me, Tesco's can reward me, because the data is shared. So it's a phenomenal opportunity. And when you're talking to brands, and we are now on our fourth workshop of have every brand sign up to an LOI to say this has to happen. We know this is the opportunity going forward. And these are the big brands like Unilever and P&G who never sit together in a room, never collaborate, to say we know this has to be the way forward. We have to share the risk by shared investment. And we then set out a series of workshops where we broke down every single barrier where they said, this is why it won't work. And what's been interesting to me today is talking about your great question about how clean can it be? The standardization of logistics, of hygiene, all of those things. So all of those things have to be addressed. One interesting question to all the brands was, what's your current standard of hygiene when you get your plastic packaging and you run it down your line? How many times do you wash that? Never. Never. So it's so interesting. Suddenly new standards have to come into play. But the exciting thing is that this is happening. And it will happen at scale. It is launching in 20 stores in January through Marks & Spencer's, massive backer of this. But it will grow very, very quickly. So my little ask to you, if you are any brand or business that wants to become part of the Reposit scheme, please let me know, because this is the way it has to happen. We have to collaborate and do it together.
Okay, brilliant. Clémence, maybe on the standardized packaging aspect, how do you view that in terms of the kind of projects that you're running?
It's a great question. So if my head of operation would sit here in front instead of me, he would say one single pack. Please, just one standard, one pack shape, one everything from an operator. That's what's the easiest, that's what's going to be the cheapest and the fastest to handle. The reality in the supermarket is slightly different. And I also think it's already hard enough to move a whole system of single use into reuse, then if you on top put the burden of, let's by the way standardize everything, that creates some frictions. And I also believe it's not because you put reusable in front of innovation or in front of business that the world of the market and the laws of the market completely transform. There are packagings and categories which are today almost already standardized. Like if you take pasta, you go in front of the shelf, they're broadly there. Cereals, they're broadly there. And then you have other category where it's more of a zoo. And it's been more of a zoo because of brand differentiation, because of the fact that how it developed, etc. And I think you can move the already almost standardized into completely standardized. You can move more difficultly the others into a standardized package. So I think it better we move from first single use to reuse. Once you're in reuse, the day you identify a cost-saving opportunity via standardization, I can tell you it will be done before I finish my sentence, because that's what business know how to do, is cost-saving. So the day a standardization becomes a cost-saving in the process, then it will happen, and it will happen naturally. I don't think there is a need to push for it. What's behind standardization also from an operator standpoint, and that we also need to appreciate it, it's great to standardize the bottle. It's great to standardize the process. But you have one very important component, which I am not a scientist like many of you here, but is the composition of the content. And what we've observed, you have something that's called product content compatibility. So that also goes into what transfers, what doesn't transfers, you know better than, much more than I do. But obviously this is something the brands are looking at, and you have shelf tests, etc. On the operation standpoint, you also have interaction with the cleaning process. And changing the formula of some product, we've done it on personal care, for example. You test 2 shampoos, exact same type of packaging. You have 7 ingredients in each of them, 3 changes, it changes the results of the washing. Because the way the washing process works interacts differently with what has been into the container. So there is the devil in the details also when it comes to standardization. It's not a one-size-fits-all, and it's not a silver bullet. It's also needs to be looked at category by category.
Yeah, thanks for those insights. Anastasia, quickly on this question of standardization. In your case, as I understand it, these are containers for consumption. Right? You're not really talking about packaging in the sense of unwrapping something. So I guess the standardization is maybe a little easier in your case. But do you still have a view on that in the broader context of reusable food packaging?
Yeah, absolutely. As Clémence mentioned, from an operator's perspective, it's a lot cheaper, more convenient, and easier to have some kind of standardization. So we're actively working towards that. So far, for when you think about like different restaurants in a city and coffee shops, we have come out with 8 containers. They fit 95% of use cases. Obviously, you can simplify even further, but there's already some kind of standardization for that. The way we go about that methodology is mapping out what kind of single-use containers are out in the market. And you will find out that there is thousands of types for no really good reason. When you try to classify them and simplify it, it's really a few sizes. So we took the systematic approach of, instead of trying to match every single container, whether it's round or rectangular, oftentimes there is no reason it's a certain shape or a certain color. So it's more about like, what is the food that needs to go in this, and what is the use case of a reusable container that can fit it. And to your point about like how far up the supply chain we go, I think compared to Loop, we don't go all the way to the manufacturer and the supplier. We really specialize in kind of packaged on the move or packaged in front of the consumer use case. So that's our containers.
Okay, brilliant. And Fernando, maybe a little bit more on the policy side, because that's where you're focusing more. At the same time, you're representing a new organization that, as I understand it, hasn't really existed before, these reuse operators coming together. So can you say something about how they are maybe converging towards a common view of how to implement reuse, and also the challenge that it represents today to convince policymakers to make the kinds of decisions that would be required to implement reuse systems?
Yeah, it's challenging. Definitely, we are an umbrella organization representing both business-to-business, business-to-consumer reusable solutions. So, yeah, as Clem said, there's no one-size-fits-all for sure. Then we have specified different takeaway, commerce, transport, packaging, and within those groups, then we identify the different solutions that are there, and try to figure out what's the best way forward. Because obviously we need to have, in a trade association, competition and innovation is key. So you cannot kind of agree on a lot of things. You need to obviously leave the market operate. So, for example, we have a lot of questions regarding return rates and the different ways how we can ensure that we take the packaging, tracking, monitoring. So these are very crucial questions that we are starting to analyze and understand how we can merge and converge together. I'd like just to make one point on standardization. We were talking about standardization of containers, but it is also, I think, very important moving forward when we will be scaling these systems, thinking on the interoperability of all these collection points. Because I understand you, for example, reusables, you have your containers, right? But what happens if new companies come in? I guess they will have, we are not going to find ourselves a situation where we will have, like with these electric scooters, different bins for every one of the providers. So I think brands and reuse providers need to be speaking on this to avoid having all this infrastructure set rollout. So it's very important, for example, in this aspect, that there is as well a lot of conversation and discussion within industry. And then from a policy perspective, we are looking in particular at the European scenario. We think it's important to give some flexibility as well, because this new reuse market, even though it existed before, now with all this digitalization, we still need to understand what's the right way forward. So we are asking the policymakers to give us some margin of maneuver. We understand obviously that standards are important, that reuse systems, the question is not when, not if, but when. So we're saying we need clear guidance for the future with targets for 2030, 2040. And then, start having these conversations with the different, not only the reuse providers, but also the brands, to understand what's the best way forward. Like what Clem, you just said, is very, the devil is in the details. So what we don't want is to go too far now and then come back and say, well, this has backfired and actually we didn't implement well the reuse systems. So for us, it's very important to take the time and do the things right, because we want, I think that's at least our main objective is to do things right. And if that's not the right way to do, then we come back and we, change the direction, whether it is for collection points, materials, whatever. We want to do the things right, and we're not saying that reuse is the silver bullet, but reuse needs to be there. It is finally in the public debate. We have now a regulation finally talking about this. So I'm optimistic that in the future we're going to have a better circular packaging approach.
Okay, brilliant. And then one question as well then on the materials themselves, right? Because we have lots of different products potentially to switch towards reuse. Do we always have actually the materials available to allow us to do that? And what are some of the implications when you use certain materials in reuse? I mean, we heard some of the questions around, cleaning and hygiene and this kind of thing. So I'd like to get a sense from you, if you were to drive a reuse policy, what would be the top 3 product categories that you would be aiming for to really create big change? And do we have the materials for them? Sean.
Well, if you think just in the UK, we throw away 100 billion pieces of plastic packaging every single year. And if we actually looked at dividing that by the number of weeks and how many times that we're using them, and imagine if they were a chunk of those were replaced by reusables. So how much we can dramatically reduce that use of natural, unsustainable resource to start with, because we're using something that can go into a loop where it's used again and again and again, and then properly recycled. Because of course we have to use a material where there is already an existing viable recycling infrastructure. So metal, I think most people are thinking that metal is going to be one of the materials of the future. We need to be very careful about coatings, exactly the conversations that have happened here already. But if that is one of the solutions, I think the number of times that you can reuse that, if you make it thick enough, robust enough, if we create a different aesthetic as well, of perhaps something has a little ding in it. I don't know if anybody remembers the Carlsberg beer bottle that had the star that was pushed out, so it was proud of the bottle. And every time it went through its reusing system, it got a little more scuffed. And people who had the star when it was really scuffed, it told a story under a QR code of where that bottle had been and the whole story behind that thing. So we've got to reinvent an aesthetic as well of what new looks like, what beautiful looks like, what sustainable looks like, so that things don't have to be so perfect all of the time. Because otherwise, if we reject a returnable or a reusable bottle because it has one tiny ding, and then it has to go back into a recycling system, I think we're going to miss the point of really reinventing the system.
Okay, brilliant. Do you want to have a go at the top 3 products that you would go for, and what kind of materials?
Yes. So I think the easier way to start are products that are consumed on a fast cycle. Why? Because of what I was mentioning at the beginning in terms of getting in a new habit. The more often you are going to do it, the more triggers you're going to do, the faster you're going to get into that habit. So whether it's from a consumer or from a business, it's much easier to go with something that is consumed on a daily or on a weekly basis. That's something that is going to be consumed every 6 months. So I would say any categories in there from the food to the beverage industries are very good candidate to start. This doesn't mean that they are the only one. We obviously, anything, we talked about the system that needs to be mutualized, we need to think bigger than this. And I think one of the downside of me saying this could be, oh, let's just get done with the beverage, like we see very fast. It works in Germany, so anyway, it can work anywhere. But if you keep thinking just for one category, then you'll make the mistake of designing just 4 bottles, for example. And I think we need to design from the beginning. Your question on material, I don't think it's a problem of the material. It's also a question because where the rubber hit the road when you come to metal is going to be the cost, right? Metal is much more expensive than plastic is today. And I, by the way, don't think when we created single-use plastic packaging, we thought, oh, we have plastic, what are we going to do with it? We just developed a value proposition and a business model which answered that question, and the material choice was just a result from that business proposition. And I think in there is a very first step, which is to define what is the proposition you're going to put into reuse. What is it that you are going to propose if you're a brand to your consumers? Do I want to have something that is super robust and is going to last for 100 cycles? Do I want to have something that is more beautiful so it can show off in my bathroom or on my kitchen counter and I'm going to be proud of displaying it? Or do I just want something that can just be like the bare minimum and then you can do it with it? So first ask yourself the question, if you're a brand, what it is that you want to provide using a packaging. And once you have answered that question, the choice of materials will come by itself.
Okay, brilliant. Anastasia, I mean, I guess you'd be probably saying also that metal and steel will have a future, right?
Well, I think it's more important to consider the wider context because you gotta have to think about the cycle holistically. If you operate in a market that doesn't really produce steel and you have to ship the steel from somewhere far away, and as well as kind of the process for recycling steel is pretty standardized, but if there isn't the necessary infrastructure available in that market and you have to outsource the end-of-life recycling of that steel somewhere else, that's going to affect your LCA, and maybe for that market specifically, steel and metal won't be the answer. So I think it's important to kind of consider the overall market dynamics. And then the other thing I'll say is that from an LCA perspective, I don't think that 100% of food packaging items will be reusable in the future. And what I mean by that is that for smaller items, for example, chewing gum, I don't really see a unit economics case where it will be worth it to package smaller items in reusables. When we kind of like look at even high-scale scenarios, I don't think cleaning costs from our modeling come down lower than 8-10 cents. And if the single-use materials, and maybe there is a more sustainable single-use material in the future that can package that more cost-effectively, I think that's where the challenge is. And it's important to kind of consider the unit economics as well as sustainability of certain applications.
Okay, thanks for throwing that one in. I hadn't thought about reusable packaging for chewing gum, but, you know, it's certainly a litter issue when people have chewed on the gum, that's for sure. If we could do something about that. Fernando, do you have a strategy in terms of products that you would really want to target in terms of the European policy-making timeline? I mean, I guess right now we're talking a lot about beverages, but do you have a strategy a bit longer term to say, here are a bunch of other product categories we really be targeting?
Totally, yeah. Well, first, the proposal of this EU regulation has completely overlooked all the retailer side, which is a pity because we know that's a place where a lot of packaging is placed on the market. So we have been focusing there, and we have made actually a list of, I would say, 20, 30 products that are already, as Clem said, rather standardized, the format and size. So definitely there's a lot of opportunities there. Pet food, cleaning products, personal care products, cereals, chocolates. I mean, lots of stuff that have just been not overlooked because the Commission, I think, wanted to put text in time so it could get adopted in this legislative term. But we are getting there, and there's good prospects because we have seen now that the legislation mentions that within 8 years the Commission will be able to review these targets and add up new product categories. So that's great. And I think it's also good not to move suddenly from single-use to reuse all products because first, and I think it's a fair question as well, as just Anastasia said, do we actually have the material, let's say, locally or regionally to cover now all this demand? Because, I mean, I'm already envisioning a potential concern here for the reuse sector, which is starting to import products from Asia that may not be compliant with EU standards regarding safety. So that's why, and I come back to the point I made before, we want to do things right. So it's good that reuse is now on the table. Let's do with, you know, as we say in Spanish, slow, but on the direction. 2030, 2040 targets is good. We have now identified different product categories. I don't know if they are the best or not. For sure, beverage is the one that makes sense because we have already a lot of examples in Germany and in other countries. And now that we have now this kind of willingness to start looking into reuse, let's bring all these platforms like the cooperative you're doing in the UK for personal care products and see what's the best product, the best material to do it right.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Now, yeah, well, we can give a round of applause. I was actually just going to say, up to you now to get stuck into this debate. Do you have any questions, reactions, comments? Yeah, okay. What we're going to do, I'm going to walk around. How are we going to do this? There's quite a few. So shall we just take them? Yeah? Shall we just take them and we'll... I'm sorry? Yeah. Okay, let's go for it. Yeah, okay, there's one coming here. Right. Okay.
Thanks a lot for the really interesting discussion. So there was a lot of points about infrastructure, and I was wondering, so for other infrastructure-heavy industries, there's usually like a tendency to go towards a monopoly or a state-driven business. So how do you view this in the case of reuse?
I'll just start quickly. So with Reposit, we're very, very cautious of that because also when you're looking at anything that collects data, then there is a value in that data to many brands. So you have to be very careful, which is why Reposit is a non-profit cooperative, which is owned by all the stakeholders. It will not be owned by a brand or a business in the usual way. And the brands simply lease their packaging from the infrastructure that is owned by everybody.
Okay. Have the microphone.
I have a mic.
Yeah, you have the power. Go for it.
So for me, it's more so thank you so much. This is super interesting to listen to all of you and so much insights. For me, it's more comments, really. I thought the point on interoperability of the reverse logistics and the take-back infrastructure is quite a critical one, and it would be really interesting to know whether there is already an ongoing discussion or this is something that we can hope for in the near future among the different organizations. And the other one is that I wonder whether you are able to also put on the table when you are talking to the brands and challenge them a little bit in terms of product redesign. So not about just the packaging itself, but the product redesign. So we are used to have our shampoos, of course, in a liquid form, our soaps in a liquid form. Do we need that? Do we need to dilute them with water? Can they become solid? So there is already a movement in that direction, of course, but I just wonder whether you have the possibility to also challenge the brands or give them an opportunity to rethink not only about their packaging when you engage with them, but also about their products.
Okay, we'll just have one answer for each. So Clémence on product design and Fernando on interoperability. Yeah.
Yes, so on product design, absolutely, right? I call them, I know there was someone from Nestle, I call them like the Nespresso, right, of reuse, which is when you disrupt the category and you just make a new form from solid shampoo, solid toothpaste, or anything like this. It can happen. As we know, there is only one quote-unquote Nespresso, right? So you don't disrupt the category for everything and for everybody. So not everything is a silver bullet. You also need to think of those who will keep liquid shampoo and make sure you also propose reusables as part of this.
And yeah, within our network of companies, we are going to be looking into this. It doesn't make any sense to have different infrastructure for the different providers, so we have to put the sharedness of infrastructure there. And we need just to find the right balance between, the providers that are going to be rolling out the infrastructure, and I don't know if it will be a license system for other providers to be using it, like maybe for telecommunications providers, we don't have phones, cables all along, it's just one provider and then licensing the use of this. So I think we just need to understand the economics of it, the context, and go for the right way to make it interoperable. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Over here.
So thank you very much for your insight. I'm a big fan of reuse. I think we need to, in future, really push this development, but it is also one of the most, I think, challenging tasks in the packaging development area. So when we look to the audience, actually, yeah, we have some students, but in average, our age is maybe not so young, yeah. And so my question is actually, the consumer behavior and acceptance is probably one of the key issues. So do you have any data? How does the new generations like Y, Z, Alpha is seeing such kind of reuse possibility, or do they really behave, or do they really act different than our generations?
Okay, we can have two on this one.
Yeah, and I will be brief, so I'm sure we're all gonna align on this. I will make a very strong statement. I would say consumers are not the problem. You're buying what you've been told. And I know we like to think we're free, right? When we're making a purchasing decision in a supermarket, we leverage all our freedom, but the reality shows us that that's not the case. We are shopping autopilot in less than 3 seconds. This was also shown again today. And if you do this in 3 seconds, you're not free in 3 seconds. Like you've been having subliminal images, you've been watching TV, you've been listening to radio, podcast, and you name it, right? So I think consumers are absolutely not the problem. We have data, we see, they return. What's missing is the infrastructure, the willingness from the manufacturers to tell you that it is reusable. Like you'll see it on recycling. Sometimes a third of the package, it's written, I'm recyclable, because they're just moving to paper. Everyone's moved to paper now. And on reuse, suddenly there is no message. So you're supposed to wake up one morning and then understand that you have to return your packaging and where to return it. So I would say really it's more of an upstream industry question than it is a consumer question.
And we have an interesting experience because we actually work with university campuses, and when we talk to those students, you're absolutely right that they're excited. They get this. A lot of them have climate anxiety and all those things, but to Clémence's point, it's not about the consumers choosing this. It's about the institution really making the decision and saying, hey, we're going 100% reuse, and that's where the power is. So to your point again, are there some use cases where reuse is easier than others? Absolutely. And universities, and we call them closed loop environments, are some of the easier ones for a few reasons. First of all, there's the same people coming there over and over again. Oftentimes they have contained environments, so that drop-off is super convenient. And lastly, there is one decision-making power saying, hey, we're doing things differently. This is standard. Essentially, they have a way to mandate reuse everywhere.
Okay, yeah, we'll have, so we have, okay, I had, but okay, fair enough, yeah, you're standing up, so, okay, let's go for it. No, he's standing up, so okay, go for it.
A short comment on what you just said a minute ago, and I think you said that you prefer incentives to penalties. What you're saying works in a good world. But we must not forget that incentive works if there's already a certain awareness, unless an incentive is a strong one, for example, money, okay? If something is cheaper, then buy. And there's a general, I wouldn't say a problem, but a general situation that we live in a bubble. We live a bubble, we all are aware. We go home, you talk to your lovely husband, and he has the same awareness of what we are talking, and we all do. But I have neighbors who are still good friends of mine who are not aware about. So how can I reach these people? These people are not, they are well educated, but they are not aware of things which we are talking now. So this is bubble awareness. Second bubble is the bubble geography. Now, we tend to think of the country where we are raised, where we live or used to live. So this is a country which has an infrastructure. I come 400 kilometers further north. We have a good infrastructure as well. But I have been in a lot of countries in my business life where there was no infrastructure for garbage and nothing helping to reuse it, etc., etc. So sometimes, and these by billions of people, these people are outnumbering us. Yeah. So this is something we have to take care. Please. No bubble, no geography, and no social bubble, and sometimes we need clearer rules. Mm-hmm. And if I want to have clean roads, I go to Singapore, and I do not go to Köln or to Berlin. Okay. Okay. Sorry for the Germans here.
We'll take that as a more philosophical comment. Okay. We keep moving.
I'm going to follow on his question and his question because I agree. We all live in bubbles. Yeah. And there are so many people out there, we need to join this effort. We have to understand what it's gonna take to bring them into our bubble or get us into theirs. What got us into this problem in the first place? Advertising, public opinion research. How do we use those tools to expand beyond the bubble? You know, we hold these values among us very tightly and we refuse to let go. Sometimes they're the wrong message. We've got to find out what the right message is, and perhaps you could sponsor an effort collectively to invest in the sort of research in public opinion that would help us guide us out of that bubble.
Okay, I'll take that as a contribution as well. If you hand over the mic just to your I was thinking left. Yeah, again, very, very short, please.
Okay, yeah. I just wanted to give a comment from a municipality point of view. We do have in mind the LCA, but at the end of the day, what we saw is the waste and the waste littering. Okay, so this is what it costs for us. It costs in Switzerland, it's more than 100 million a year for municipalities and public transportation society to collect the littering coming from food waste. Okay, so I'm really surprised that we didn't talk about money, and I think that the cost of waste management and waste littering is key to convince policymakers to change. And I would be delighted that Migros or Coop would pay for the waste they are producing, because the point is, it's not that the single use is cheap, it's that they're not paying the true costs, okay, of the single use packaging. And I just wanted to rebound on your comment. We just published a paper on psychological determinant on reusables. Yeah. And we've made a research within the canton of Geneva on that topic, and 17% of takeaway consumers want to use less single use, but they just don't know how. And infrastructure is key, but it's very difficult for us to talk with the restaurants because they want to maintain the system and they want to maintain the best they can is to maintain the double choice, single use versus reusable, and it's not working because the human being is going where the easiest way and where what he knows. So, but if you in the universities, you're absolutely right. In Geneva, we put 100% reusable in the university cafeteria, and it's working. So if you put 100% reusable, the consumer doesn't have a choice, and it's just working.
I think you nailed it. We think we have choice. We don't actually have choice. We have no choice whether we buy single use or not. We need to stop giving people choice. Give them the right thing and do it at scale and do it cheaply, conveniently, and coolly so we feel like we're buying into the future, not the past, and then we can make it work. And it's the same for business. It's cost for business as well. But when we look at EPR and carbon tax, then the costs are coming down the line very, very, very fast for them. Reckitt told me that on 2 brands alone, the carbon tax will make a $300 million hit to their bottom line on 2 brands. They have many, many brands. So when we can talk about reusables and the reduction in the carbon impact that they will have to account for with EPR, then we can really start to talk numbers.
Okay, we'll have a last one. Last one.
So there's a lot, like Sean said, so there's this talk about, like, for example, shampoo or like hygiene products or just overall food packaging being made of aluminium in the future. But I don't think there's one thing taking into accountability, and is the shipping, like, because, for example, aluminium is a lot heavier than any other plastic products. So that's, I think, like, how will that affect the kind of sustainability? Because again, like, if it's more heavy, then that means maybe like certain vehicles can't take it. So then just gonna be more vehicles, more pollution if it's, for example, gasoline vehicles. So I just wanted to ask, like, how is that going to be taken into place, into consideration?
Okay, so a kind of LCA one to finish off. Nice. Okay, a quick answer.
Yes, it's LCA, but it's also economics, because if you have more transport, you add more cost to the system. So you have to weigh a triangle between the weight of your package, the kilometers, so what's your geography, as well as what we call in loop nestability. So this, you cannot nest. This, you can stack one of the other. Not so great, but it's already better than if I put 2 bottles into the others, right? The third factor to this is standardization. And basically, it will depend on what your model is. So if you have one single plant that serves all of Europe, you pretty make sure that your packaging is going to be light, because you're going to have to make kilometers, right? If you want to have a heavy bottles, and Germany has a lot of studies on this, where you have a certain radius of kilometers that you can make with a glass bottle, so it's reusable in still a sustainable way, so from an environmental impact, but also from an economical impact. So there is no one answer to your question, but it's which buttons you're pushing at which moment.
Okay, brilliant. And we will then finish a final round for you. Very quick. You mentioned the New Year's resolution. So what is your reuse resolution 2024? Fernando, reuse resolution?
Well, I guess that's an easy one. Get the PPWR adopted with ambitious reuse targets. And just to say that one of the things we want is to get out there from the reuse bubble. This needs to be affordable and convenient for everyone. So we will devote to that task. So not in this kind of room we will be discussing reuse, but maybe in the streets. We had actually an event, just very quickly, in Brussels, literally in a park, and it was kind of interesting to see that there were families stopping by and getting interested in that. Even there was a man with a guitar who asked about, this informal economy of what reuse could mean as well for them. So we are looking into all these aspects. And let's make reuse the new normal. That's what I would say to end it up.
Okay, brilliant. Reuse resolution 2024.
I would say accelerate. We have many reasons to wait, to see, to think, to discuss. There is a lot of hesitation. I think now is the moment to act. So go faster.
Okay, brilliant. Anastasia.
For us, it's just continuing to prove the business case at scale and show that reuse wins from environmental and financial perspective both.
Okay, and Sean had to leave. She has a flight, so apologies on her behalf. It's not that she was fleeing the last question at all. I'm sure she has plenty of reuse resolutions as well. A warm round of applause for our panelists. You've been great. Thank you so much.